Good evening, everyone. You are now attending Poetry Square, and I'm Diane Funston, Yuba Sutter Arts and Culture Poet in Residence. And we have our show the third Thursday of every month, and this is the third Thursday. So prepare yourself for three poets following me, all with very different and unique styles, and some wonderful poets tonight. Um, I'm going to start us off with some poems, and then we'll go on to our three guests. And we have our first international guest tonight, a man who's reading from Malaysia. And we have another poet from Pennsylvania on the East Coast, and we have a woman from Seattle. So we have kind of a mixture of, but I'm very proud to have our first international guest tonight. That's very nice. And without Zoom, none of this would be possible. This poem is called Unfinished Orphan. I come from waterfalls and stone, innocence lapsed. My heart says unfinished orphan. My mind says preoccupied spelunker. I forget hazy secrets, but remember all suggested retail prices. Too many in that congregation to recall divinity. My grandfather was a windfall of blankets, of gnarled hands, a bee blocks of love poured from a spigot in an old comfortable cemetery, where my phantom family rises upright, a porch light, a narcotic milk sluiced into my wounded mouth, resolving shadows in rust belt residue. I once discarded memories I now seek and call forth, my imagination ablaze. I come from waterfalls and stone, innocent lapsed. My heart says unfinished orphan. And this next poem is called All Are Sacred. Poetry and fiction are my scriptures, both slake my thirst for truth. Truth fills my bookshelves, volume after volume. Truth comes in many different verses. All are true. In many diverse voices, all are sacred. I collect a choir of voices, each singing a different pitch, overlooking myriad views, at times the same. A deep forest, an angry ocean, so many ways of seeing, of saying truth. Never with a capital T, often in erasable pencil. Truth is mutable, it changes with experience. It is amused by alternative answers, especially by those who are entirely certain. And who among us is really entirely certain? And Ars Poetica is a sort of a poem about writing poetry. And this is my Ars Poetica. Imagination is the geometry of the brain, co-author of both gods and demons, allowing them to sit on opposite shoulders, advise or consent, truth or dare. Would you rather go quietly safe or with a bang and a growl? We are all alchemists of our own prison bars. We forge the iron, disappointed it doesn't become gold. Perhaps it does, fool's gold. Don't underestimate the semi-precious. For whoever does not, for whoever does has not walked through crystal caverns or held a crown of amethyst. We add color and language to make meaning. We survive the blank canvas only if our minds draw etch-a-sketch rainbows without paint-by-number diagrams or mathematical formulas. Somewhere deep there is music, illumination without electricity, words without grammar or syntax. Write them down, keep them inside you, where all poetry comes from. And my husband and I used to travel quite a bit in the pre-COVID days, and we're hoping to get back to that. But this is called Climate Change. Deep in El Yunque rainforest on the island of Puerto Rico, we rocked in the hammock listening to the frogs coqui, 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 a lullaby in the mist where we had time to watch the ice in our drinks shift in the melt from the heat. Hidden behind a cobblestone alley, we sidestepped rain and arrived at the bar in the Latin Quarter of Paris for the green hour, when water from a drip hits the sugar cube on the silver cutout spoon and they dissolve into the absinthe, releasing the green fairy. In the August winter chill, the wineries welcomed us in the fertile Hunter Valley. We bought oilcloth coats and sat in the upper outside seats of the tour bus in Sydney, just to catch the opera house at night, the old churches by day. Lately, after 2 years in survival mode, fire that took us away from the garden to a suburb of rigid rules, a return to a home rebuilt from the ashes, our beloved dog taken away, a trip to help in a very dry New York state, a sweet puppy giving back. We've been grounded in our travel and our dreams, to sit and remember how it was before the closings and quarantine, the unnatural disasters, before when we flew away like lovebirds, tasting the nectar of travel, the privacy of one another without interruption or modesty. I sit alone with my gin and tonic from the gift of our own lemons. I think of new places to see when the masks come off. I make a list, beginning with the tropics. I always look for heat when I write. And this one is kind of spawned after a conversation I had with at least one of my 3 sons. It's called Man in the Moon. I'll plant a pink dogwood tree next week, but not for my children. My sons will sell this house after I'm gone to grave. They'll want none of my collections. My garden may be plowed under, returned to wasteful, unimaginative lawn, fertilized, manicured, roundup. My rocks and minerals, 2 big glass cabinets full, will be eBayed and auctioned, despite the eons to form and my years to collect them. The glass curio of Mexican folk art, Dia de los Muertos, Catrinas and Catrines, skulls and fantasy animals, will cross the border of my home to be scattered to thrift stores along with never-fading Talavera. Will the Man in the Moon still be there, along with lunar art, sculptures of Moon Mother received with love, gifts from friends who knew my spirit, or the polar bears, my spirit animal? Books will be in the hands of strangers, all the poetry of knowns and unknowns, all their passionate words, brave insertions, the literature from brave new worlds, gathering dust instead of discussion in the local Goodwill. So I'll plant the pink dogwood tree next week into my lush front garden, devoid of pedestrian lawn, amidst fruit trees and vegetable plots, succulents and redwoods. I'll live my life in the pleasure of my curated joy, my lust for travel and adventure, until I too am plowed under, forever facing upward. Will the man in the moon still be there? Yeah, there's nothing like travel for opening your mind to a lot of things. And speaking of fruit trees, I have citrus right now in California is coming, almost ready for harvest. And I have a kumquat tree, which is loaded with kumquats. And this is my next poem called Kumquats. Trying them for the first time at a tea room in a salad, a miniature orange, I thought, biting into the whole, feeling the tang of the almost sour surprise on my palate, followed by sweetness. Today I have a tree in the front yard, under the window. Sweet blossom scent wafts inwards, biting into the harvest, the reality of both sensations taken in small measure, moments of a lifetime, bittersweet. Tonight, heavy rains predicted, a cacophony against skylights. The orchestra begins a soft prelude, building in syncopation until staccato daggers, stabs of rainfall, slant with determination, arrows of wet precision hitting roof tiles, descending down angles through gutters in a ponderous cleanse, like a colonic promise to rid the pain of drought's blockage. Um, and this one is kind of, it's called Made Over Closet. And it talks about the things we go through, as poets. And I can remember a time when you really dressed the part of the poet and went to coffee houses, and it's kind of gotten very casual since then. So this is called Made Over Closet. The skeletons are gone now, evicted after rent control failed, moves across country, across the Golden State, in and out of disparate lives, hardly recognizable now. The young poet, when poets dressed the part, velvet cloak and flowing dresses, floated in enigmatic twirls in smoky coffee houses, now gone, perhaps gentrified. The student, carved leather ponytail holders, Indian gauze peasant blouses, scent of patchouli deep in creases, T-shirts of musicians, earthborn shoes, the book bag stuffed with ego. The mom, also cross-dressed with student and worker, more T-shirts, some stained, logos faded, jeans as uniform, earrings and necklaces left off or pulled off those days. The case manager, office job, dress pants and serious tops, blazers and sensible dress shoes, never comfortable in an office, confused with Excel spreadsheets and billable time. Fortune smiled, laid off after 6 months, 2 years unemployment checks arrived. Aging became noticeable too. At first, my monthly chemicals, my hair whitened into the blizzard I now wear proudly. My clothing colors too, from favorite green to royal blue to enhance my ermine crown. Now comfortable clothes without pretense or uniform in this pandemic time. Making sure top half presentable for Zoom groups of new friends, chapter and verse from far away and close. If this is indeed the new norm, I could do with just a week's worth of clothes, donating my closet to others to try on for size. I putter in my garden, I putter with words, play with my dogs, and hike with my husband, less dressed to kill and much more dressed to live. Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from our first international poet, a man from Malaysia, Julian Matthews. And take it away, Julian. You're next. I believe he said it was 6 o'clock in the morning there. Welcome, Julian.
Hi, Diane. It's actually 11:15 a.m. On a Friday. So my name is Julian Matthews. I'm quite new at this, only been writing poems for the last 4 years. So the first poem is in reaction to the scenes at Hamid Karzai Airport in August this year, when men were seen desperately clinging onto US aircraft in Kabul, Afghanistan. It's called Falling Men. The news clip came with a warning, a crossed out eye icon. Sensitive content. This video may show violent or graphic content. They needed to freeze frame the video and circle the blurred distant figures in red as if to say, here be human beings. Once again, it's proven that men can't fly. In Kabul or Saigon or New York, the lesson of Icarus is Greek to us all, even to the literate. History repeated, men defeated. Pilots, like leaders, can destroy or save the day. It's all perspective. It's either a cape or another caper. No escape for the escapee. No refuge for the refugee. But there are no heroes here, just the quiet desperation of silhouettes in midair. Human beings with hearts and hopes and dreams, now crumpled bodies on the tarmac. A host on Zoom open mic once welcomed me as a poet from the Far East. I suppose it could have been worse. He could have said Oriental or Third World, or used the blanket term Asian. Maybe I should embrace the fact that I'm not just from a single nation, but am continental, better engineered, luxury branded, more expensive. But Asian nor African aren't terms associated with continental, are they? Better a continent than incontinent, I say. I'm reminded of the photo of the falling man of 9/11, the sharp, focused outline of another human being in midair, against the stark backdrop of black and white vertical lines of the soon to collapse Twin Towers. Uncertainty of who he was still hangs in the air. They say he may have been a staff at Windows of the World, a restaurant in the North Tower. The body was never found. Amid the ash and ashen, all is gray. Sometimes the lens of red, white, and blue is blurry, unfocused. We know how we got here. We just don't know how we're going to leave. It's all perspective. There are no heroes here. We look out through our own windows of the world now. We zoom in and zoom out, muting and unmuting each other, depending on who's the host, the pilot, the leader. Sometimes the meetings are recorded, sometimes not. Sometimes people are focused, clear. Sometimes they are blur or cracking up. Sometimes they are quiet, grieving. Sometimes people fall off the screen and are never heard of again. In the virtual world, it's easy to click leave and just go. In the real world, leaving always comes with a price. Thank you. The next poem is a personal one about mental health. my mother's passing, and some fallout after. It's entitled Saris, Jeans, and Jagger. Come and take Mom's saris. I hadn't been there since the funeral. I was wary. The nasty cold messages back and forth, the odd urgency of having to divide her pound of flesh by six, even before her warm ashes were interred, even before the glow of her memory had dimmed. Sister, I remember the first time you returned from England, your long hair and flared jeans with hippie flowers and the brown tape deck playing the 70s rock anthem, the Rolling Stones, I can get no satisfaction. That was all the rage in London. I, the youngest, and you, the oldest. And we danced just like Jagger. We hadn't seen each other for so long. You were studying to be a nurse while I was being nursed into boyhood, the runt of the litter, the crybaby, the one born with clubbed feet, mummy's boy, the spoilt one. Why do people say spoilt? Like as if we were milk that went bad, like as if we had gone past our sell-by date to be discarded in metal bins behind supermarkets. I was human too, just like you. Nervous breakdown. I associate that condition to your shaky squiggles on the postcard from London that said, I'm fine. But no, you weren't. Somebody had to go to find out why, to bring you home. The nurse was broken, and it fell to Mom to put you back together. Mom, my mom, Chinese by birth, Indian by upbringing, barely 5 feet in her potu, sarongs, and her saris, who pulled my nose to make it less like hers, who taught me those wonderful Tamil words, muttal, korangu, sanyan, and my favorite specifically for dad, karappu suttu velakaran, a phrase that came about from that year they were in England together, with you. The pristine black and white photographs are proof of it. You were the special one. You had them all to yourselves. Mommy's and daddy's girl, in pure happiness, unspoilt, uncrying, playing in the white, white snow, the place where you returned only to be defiled. You graduated and entered your profession and your assigned hospital as a nurse, but came back as a patient, shelved, awaiting your sell-by date, to be discarded in a mental bin. But you were human too, just like me. When you came back, you were mostly in your room, drugged, distant, disconnected. We never danced like Jagger again. There was no satisfaction to get. But you got better, you got a job, you grew your hair out, you were beautiful again. Then it happened again, and again, and again. And I saw Mom pick up the broken pieces of you and her heart and never being able to put them both back exactly right again. I will never understand the roller coaster of your mind like I will never understand the roller coaster of my own life. Sometimes joy, sometimes dread, always moving. The first time it happened in front of us, it alienated us as 5 other siblings forever, like petals of a flower pulled apart, and you in the center, never to hug, never really close, always wary, always cold, never getting close, choosing friends, never trusting, love you not, love you not, love you not. And so Mom took you in when all of us turned our backs on you. Her love for you, unconditional. Ours as cold as the air condition in the car now. We came for our saris, to claim only 6 yards that wrapped her, though miles and miles unwrapped the distance between us. Silkworms died for this, so we could connect the fractured, frayed fabric of our lives. At least one for my daughter to remember her by, and at least one for my wife, we said. You were singing in front of a blaring TV, tuned to our dead mother's channel, Vanaville, maybe even dancing by yourself. We chose the saris, we ate, we laughed, We showed you how to use WhatsApp, your first new purchase from a spoils. I showed you how to brighten your Samsung in the daylight. You at first refused, shy of your ignorance. Then it brightened. You took the phone back, flicked it back to normal, dimmed, then flicked it back to bright again. You glowed. Our eyes met. And for the briefest of moments in this jagged life, we danced again. Thank you. This next poem is in reaction to the discovery of unmarked graves in the residential schools in Canada. It's called Bringing Up the Bodies from Unmarked Graves. Epigraph. The only crime we committed as children was being born indigenous. We will find our more bodies and we will not stop until all our children are found. Chief Bobby Cameron, Federation of Sovereign Indian Nation. Hey Google, define unmarked, not marked or bearing identifying markings. When they bring up the bodies from unmarked graves, will you see the scarring of their raw flesh? Will you feel the violation of their fragile frames? Will you smell the branding of their pink tongues? Will you hear their muffled cries? Alone, in the dark, night after night. When they bring up the bodies from unmarked graves in Canada, will you think of the children in every other former colony, every conflict zone, every disputed territory, every refugee camp, every squatter's slum, every logged rainforest, every place you entered, every patch of land you exploited? Will you think of the children in your own city, town, suburb, neighborhood, your next door neighbor's children, the children in your own home tonight? Hey Google, define indigenous, originating or occurring naturally in a particular place, native. When they bring up the bodies of children from unmarked graves, will you Google their names, their tribes, their culture, their claims? Will you apologize for the desecration of your forefathers? Will you forgive the sins of your fathers and mothers? Will you start the healing of generation upon generation of unprocessed pain? Will you break the chain of trauma over trauma? Will you see through this insanity? Will you end it all here? Hey Google, define bring up. Look after a child until it is an adult. When they bring up the bodies of children from unmarked graves, will you uncover their white bones, stained with your guilt and fear and shame? Will you unearth only shadows that their beautiful, warm souls left behind? Or will you expose their hopes, their dreams, their truth in the sun, all they could have become? Will you see the sparkle of their eyes in your own children's eyes? Will you hear their peals of laughter, their playful shouts of joy, their mighty hearts still singing, still singing? Thank you. The last poem is an ode to the Malaysian flag, which bears some similarities to the American flag, red in white stripes and a blue backdrop in the left corner, but with a yellow crescent moon and 14-pointed star. It's called Banderaku, or My Flag. I wave my flag in tawny poems because I'm too embarrassed to show you off in tatters, stripped of your stripes, your crescent eclipse, your pointy star blunted. My words are meant to prick, but they're not daggers nor kris. It's not good for my constitution to keep them inside. It's also bad for my heart. But if you look closely, you can see the patriotism in the whites of my eyes. You can feel the nationalism when they are bloodshot red. You can hear the anthem of my soul crying out when I am blue. You can sense the pride when I march in unison with my fellow yellows. We link arms and sing the Nagaraku because, hey, It's our country too. My poems are my battle cry for you. My rhymes are there to straighten their crooked lines. My alliterations are raucous rallying raps to get us back on track. My puns are the stitching of your sides. My consonants are the higher tread count of your fabric, the higher ground we tread to discount their dread. My imagery yearns to return your colors that have run insane. My metaphors are my longing to unfurl you in the sun again. My Malaysia is a million valiant, vigorous voices wanting to raise a nation's flagging, fading fervor. Don't need to stand at attention to appreciate it. Just pay attention, because it's freely given. And if they still can't take the brave words of us poetic souls, then they can just hang us from the nearest pole. Thank you. Thank you for your time. I appreciate being here.
Julian, that was amazing. Thank you. It's an honor to be reading with you tonight. There's some very powerful, inspiring poems there. No refuge for the refugee. I had to write that down. And thank you, Diane, for inviting us to be here tonight. I am David Bauman, and Diane had mentioned if we had any publications to push that we should. And so this was my first chapbook back in 2017. So I thought I'd read you a little something from each of the three that I have here, and give you a little something new as well. As Diane said, I'm off in Pennsylvania, so it's what is it now? It's after 10 o'clock anyway, heading toward 11. Still early for me, I think. This poem, the book is called Moons, Roads, and Rivers. It was from Finishing Line Press. And this was a little sample from that called Bubblegum. And one of my favorite poets, one of my favorite American poets was William Stafford. So there's a little epigraph from him at the beginning from his poem Graffiti. But the trees not carved and wall undefaced mean not even Kilroy was here. The poem Bubblegum. The sheer rock wall along Route 22, someone has written bubblegum. Not fuck you, not God hates fags, not even John 3:16. I've been directed by graffiti to repent, commanded through placards to give what's right, not what's left. But now and then Kilroy or Boone scribbles on rock again, a message rare as church marquees bidding peace to you. Without telling who was there this time, the words merely remind in a flash something good, something kind. And why complain just because the flavor doesn't last? Moons, Roads, and Rivers is much like, I guess, the title sounds. It's a lot of it sort of is a mood piece. There's a accidentally muted myself. Sorry about that. There's a lot of imagery across my state of Pennsylvania, and my travels from there to Indiana and back over my life. The next chapbook that I came out with was from Seven Kitchens Press, and it's a lot more personal in nature, and it's called Angels and Adultery. And all of these, by the way, are available from the publishers, or even some of them from me, depending on if I have copies. I think I have copies of all of them right now. But you could also just go to my website. There's the links there. It's davidjbauman.com. Thank you, Diane, for encouraging me to say that. This is the opening poem from Angels and Adultery, and kind of give you a taste of what this is, this story is about. It's called Timothy. We became friends after I punched you, after you put me in that headlock. You were the new kid at the bus stop, you with that heavy Texas accent, talking like you knew the world about everything because you'd lived where things were bigger. and skies were wider. Later, you confided that where you'd lived, bushes smelled like dead animals, rotting in the heat. And you didn't look so tough at the YMCA pool, shivering and skinny. Pale, blotched skin, blue veins like tributaries on a thin white map of flesh. But I loved you. I could not say it, not then, not in that world, not even to myself. So I did like I'd seen men do. I loved you with a fist. And the final, I'm going to skip ahead to the end poem in this little chapbook. 17 poems here. And this is the last. And I noticed, I was thinking about it tonight, that it seems like in all of my publications, my final poem kind of goes off into fantasy land somewhere. I hadn't noticed that trend until I was thinking about it earlier. And apparently I also like epigraphs, because this one has an epigraph from African Genesis when Robert Ardrey in 1961 wrote, "We are risen apes, not fallen angels." The poem is called Genesis Retold. You are not flesh of my flesh. You are not bone of my bone. We are made of the same dust, but your ribs are your own. When I was Adam and named the beasts, I chose the wrong companion every time. Bear, tiger, possum, sloth, bird, boar, fish, chameleon, surfer dude, church guy, trickster, snake, quiet man, little spike, sycophant, saint. This is not the story that is told in the old book, but it's as true as I remember. When at last, against a garden tree, I slept off that binge of partners, I did not dream you up. When I awoke, I strolled alone and naked through the garden to the stream where I found you, counting apples on an upturned root. A creature not of me, but like me. When we looked into the water, our faces, side by side, created their own reflections. Despite the later claims of others, we found our bodies fit, perfectly, variously. And it was we who drove the serpent out. He left in such a hurry he forgot to take his legs and slithered toward the bushes that we later burned. Don't listen to the lies they tell you. Paradise was never lost. It spread everywhere, undetected, in weeds and grass. Walks in the cool of the day are no less joyous than before, and gardens have never planted themselves. Whatever else you may have heard is merely myth. Stories to ease our pain, to shed the blame, reframe our own bad choices, or unearned shame as banishment by gods, seduction by demons. Few remember where it is, but the gate still stands, unguarded and overgrown, with ivy and blooming flowers. If there ever was a cherubim, he long ago gave up his post, his flashing sword a rusty hilt, a useless broken cross in the dirt. And my recent chapbook, the one I think most proud of, is the work that I've done with my son Micah, who may or may not be up late enough to be watching this. I lost a bookmark, but that's okay. This is another personal journey, and this one deals with family and depression, the autism spectrum, and mental health in general and family, and for both of us, really. And Micah James Bauman, my youngest son, is a very brave young man. I'm very proud of him for working on this with me. This just came out this year, again from Seven Kitchens Press, as part of the editor's series for 2021. We'll give you a couple of poems of mine from this. Our poems throughout this book communicate back and forth with each other, and so I'm give you a little bit of the father's point of view in this book. And he and I met Richard Blanco, I think back in 2012, when he was reading He was the inaugural poet, second inaugural poet of Barack Obama's presidency, and we got to meet him at Penn State when he was reading there. And this was sometime later. It's called Emergency Room, and again, an epigraph, this time from Richard Blanco's One Today. A new constellation waiting for us to map it. Emergency room. A uniformed officer guards the door in this low-lit corner of the hospital. I see you sitting up in bed, calm now. In her text, your mother said that you did not want to see me, so I seek her out instead. She is speaking with a doctor in a green smock who nods for me to go in. A year from now, in a hospital like this, I will storm out, furious at a therapist who insists you are well enough to go. I will break, imagining your return over and over. You will stare me down through the window of another door, fists at your sides. But today, I have brought the books you asked for, including the one by the poet we met, the saddle-stitched copy which we forgot to have him sign. 9 stanzas written for the country. We read them together in this colorless room. No sun, no moon, no window but the door. It's a good poem, you say. I nod. There is no map for this place. And as I said earlier, that I recognized my tendency to go off into fairyland. This last poem started as a true story, and I wasn't happy with the ending. And Micah and I were on a camping trip a couple of years ago, and I said it ends correctly, historically, but I'm not happy with it. And I said, what if it went off into Fantasyland? And he liked the idea. So that informed the title, which is now How It Ought to Be. How It Ought to Be. When we stepped up into the bus that shuttled us from car to hospital, she was standing by the man in the overcoat and fedora. But at the next stop, he stood up, tipped his hat, and clambered down the steps. Her smile made me think of plums, though barely a brush of rouge on her cheeks. She wore a heavy old woman's wraparound like a blanket with buttons, tugged about her like a fur stole. The bus lurched forward, and she turned toward the lady 2 seats up. May I ask where you got that gorgeous shawl? Oh, please don't, the other laughed. It's very old. They don't make them anymore. The fur-plum lady in her blanket coat began to recount how her gran used to wrap her in a shawl like that. Bigger, half the size of a bedsheet. My grandfather walked behind to help unwrap me when I got to school. I whispered in your ear, causing you to giggle. Is he misbehaving? She asked you, like a scolding but indulgent aunt. She asked us what we had for breakfast, what time was our appointment. Hers were always early. What were our plans for the holiday? The holiday? Easter, still 2 weeks away. Well, she said as she stood up, if you're still hungry, come to my place. I always have plenty left over. She drew her massive coat around her and took the steps one at a time. Poor soul, the driver said, and for a moment I wondered whose. She says that kind of stuff to everyone. He pulled the lever that closed the door. She lives alone. This time, you whisper to me, and 2 weeks later we are standing on her lawn. You carry the pies, I have the wine, the woman in the floral shawl holds the casserole. The shuttle bus parked at the curb. We thought we'd surprise her, but the fur-plum lady beams like she's expecting us as she throws the door open, takes our jackets and hangs them by the others. Rows of hats and wraps, a fedora and an overcoat. She shows us to our seats at a table impossibly long for her tiny home. Others in white lab coats are unfolding extra chairs. A doctor with her stethoscope is lighting the candles. A young man from the hospital cafe helps the CEO fill glasses with sparkling water. Other guests we recognize from shuttle rides and waiting rooms. The table is draped, I see it now, with that grand old shawl of yore, adorned with salads, collard greens, and plums, of course, scalloped potatoes and beans of every hue. And you're smiling like you used to, as the oncologists enter with steaming platters, boats of gravy, and the doorbell just keeps ringing. And quickly, I'll read this last poem. It's one that I asked Mike if he would still be up if he wanted to have any requests. And this one is a collaboration that he and I did. It's coming up, going to be coming up in a Keystone Poetry anthology. Not this year, but this is called Refuge. And the epigraph is from Atlas Obscura that tells a little bit about this little former town. In the spring of 1942, the federal government seized the small village of Elvira, Pennsylvania, and after kicking out the populace, razed almost every building in the village to build the Susquehanna Ordnance Depot. Refuge. Below Bald Eagle Mountain, you can find what remains. South of the old stone church, the only building left standing. A few stone walls, 3 cemeteries, and 149 bunkers. Ordnance, a variant of ordinance, cousin of ordain, a carefully chosen word. The townsfolk were assured they could come home when the war was over. 80 years later, almost no one has. The soil no longer fit for farming. A state game land sign tells a disarmed version of the truth. The whole operation shuttered 11 months after completion. These concrete igloos lie almost empty, taken over by brush and brambles, buried and crowned with a tangle of trees, territory of hunters and turkeys. Inside these hills are cacophonies of echoes, stacks of steel and lumber, a broken rocking chair, charred wood, ashes from a fire ring. But not all the heavy doors have been welded shut. Scraps of stories have since been scrawled on inner walls and entranceways. Drooping boughs of rhododendron hide one blank slab and a crumbling foundation. Who knows what once was or who lived here? High in the forked limbs of the maple hangs a new woven nest where an orchard oriole sings. Again, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Hello. As you can see, I'm Cheryl Lateef, and I want to thank Diane for inviting me to participate and the other poets for their wonderful work. I'm going to start with a poem that ironically seems to go with a lot of what we've heard because there's been gardens in so many of the poems that have been read tonight. This poem is called Star Lilies. Soil between your fingers, you lead me through the garden. It is early morning. Crisp air and the fragrance of your favorite blooms stir my senses. We speak in metaphor, seduced by words left to interpretation. You cut me star lilies and freesia. You want your magic to linger. Content in transitory moments, we play under the arc of laden bows, pretend there is permanence in the mere curve of letters, cut flowers, a kiss. You invite me in, fine vases. As the sun plays on your hands, now clean, you lovingly arrange garden gifts. A bud opens as if delighted to be in this small upstairs apartment. You know the face of my passion, trace the fine lines of my longing with fingers experienced in coaxing flowers to bloom. Beyond the well-tended beds of your garden, winding paths lead to the question you turn from. We lose our way. I return home knowing you will not follow. Upstairs, the star lilies, their fragrant flesh becoming translucent. Soon, petals will fall, one by one. Star lilies are my favorite flower. About 20 years ago, I was diagnosed with some things, autoimmune issues, and I hadn't written much about it because I didn't think you could write about stuff like that without it being pathos. But I read some Jane Kenyon and realized that you could. And so this is one of the poems that I've written about this journey I've been on. There are only moments now when illness is forgotten, when the woman I once was returns to my skin and a trick of imagination sees me sprint to the corner in time for the light, hike the trail up Cowles Mountain. She is a phantom. This is my grief, this siren in the shadows, teasing dreams of muscles warm and limber, stretching the truth of expectation, twisted recompense, late spring. Only she knows how rest comes when sleep will not, how I follow my breath, its circular motion, draw stillness from the hummingbird's flight, how I stumble toward grace, offer prayers, give thanks, wait for moments rich with forgetting. Thank you. And this is another piece that I wrote about this particular journey. It's entitled Charting My Course. I have learned the language of phlebotomy, about butterfly needles, how many breaths will take me through a 14 vial collection, and the art of waiting. I have come to expect the dispassionate demeanor of specialists, the sound of starched white coats, the chill of exam rooms. Sterile interpretations of antigens, anti-nuclear antibodies, and sedates have expanded my vocabulary, if not my horizons. Weather forecasts have become meaningless. The shortest day of the year too long. Yet somehow days continue to begin and end in rush hour traffic outside my window. Absent reason, I travel hope. And now something totally different. Longing for Giverny. Even now the peonies, musk of whispered promises, overspent blooms in rooms empty too long. Their withered petals hold memories like dust motes, irony of spring full of rain and summer sun. The promise, the abandoned coda. Try as you might, you can't push aside harsh truth, reclaim those youthful afternoons, the spill of my hair on your skin. Our season has passed. Try as I might, I can't break the spell of Giverny, shimmering lily pond, the purple iris, white lilies, song of cascading water, all of it washed away. In a room far from here, you sit, brush in hand, stroke impressions on canvas, a lover's honeyed strands caressing bare skin, her hard nipples, her soft breasts. You rest within this, the blues, winter ice, safely hidden like your heart. I have had a friend who did a lot of traveling, and I wrote this as a result of some of that. It's entitled Postmarks. I read your letter again this morning. You never say where you are, just that you are enjoying the continent, missing the soft curves of my body. It's the same letter time and again, only the postmark reveals a different story. These absences come and go while I unfold letters, search for something new, a place for me between the lines. In today's mail, another note. I think I'll leave it unopened. Read the postmark, make up my own story. I would rather write about peace. It's far too cold for wandering alone without a coat, just harsh enough to stay at the window looking out, hand pressed against the pane. The streets are full of strangers carrying burdens no one can guess. There are no replacement parts left. I see it in their faces. Some days I don't fret so much about nuts and bolts, planned obsolescence. Other days, this machine of flesh won't let me forget. Once you've left the house, there's no turning back. It doesn't matter that you have a spare key. That's not what will save you. Curl up like a beggar sheltered in the church vestibule, but leave your faith behind. You'll find time enough come morning to believe. Those bruises, they're not from sleeping on concrete or fists against skin. You got them from the soft places where you thought you were safe. It's okay to make plans if they ease you. Just know, traffic alerts mean nothing. Love is homeopathic, and fear is musky like pheromones. As long as the bombs land somewhere else, we're free. Turbulence. A routine check, 6 to 9 months. Lesson in the velocity of stage 4 cells. The sudden gravity of it thrusts you into the pilot's seat, navigating crosswinds, struggling to keep him aloft. 10 years ago, it was you facing a storm front, pulling out of a nosedive, earning your wings. Milagro, the doctors called you. Death is proud and holds a grudge. Cabin pressure drops, the engines roar beneath you. Maybe we'll beat this. There's not always time to file a new flight plan. The pills make his angular face a soft circle of moon. The chemo takes his hair. You see him still as your love at 19, laying in St. Augustine grass, writing names in the clouds, guessing destinations of planes above. How swiftly can a jet fall from the sky? You hold on, anticipate the moment tires hit runway, the bounce, the screech. Now you worry. How long before his face disappears from the sky? I don't usually write form poems, but I wrote this on the anniversary of 9/11, and it's a truncated sestina entitled Ash Tuesday. Cleansed at last of burial ash, you return to tell of angels falling from the sky, the fire where you lost yourself as day turned to night in brittle madness. Streets brushed with unspeakable dust clouds, embers burning the city silent. How your subway car suddenly shuddered silent, the ground above heaving as towers fell to ash. Trapped below, none of you knew, only embers of wild confusion igniting distrust. Even there, with no sky, you tasted the coming madness, humanity's dark night. You helped a pregnant woman to the street like night, joined the tide of muffled footsteps, silent exodus across the bridge. Toward what? This madness knows no borders. Eyes burning with tears and ash, you walked blind. 9 a.m. daylight wiped clean from the sky. Dawn of a new era hissing like embers. Back turned on a vision once sought. Embers of love swathe the night. Like neon in the sky. Rain down in silent questions. What was true? What was ash? Maybe God rides a Harley for Yahweh. Across night I travel to sterile rooms where crises play out under harsh fluorescence, where the aftermath of a single moment is a staccato of scissors cutting clothes from torsos, medics working in orchestrated chaos, the stuff of late night news. A clock on the wall ticks, each moment a lifetime. I pretend to read yesterday's headlines, set my shallow breath to sounds around me, knitting needles, coin-fed phones, street traffic dissected by automatic doors, a doctor's footsteps. I look up to read your fate on his face. And I will end with this. It's entitled Tango. Past and future tangle through the hours of a father who soon won't know my name. Mother in stage 4 reprieve. This cadence of crises plays in the background like an old 45 on repeat. In the quietude of morning, foghorns hold me like bowed notes of violin and cello. I stand mute within an opus of memories. Past and future tango by. Coda looms in the wings. This year finds spring pushed aside by an aging winter's arias of snow and ice. These long nights at a cold window evoke years syncopated by estrangement, tempo of anger and silence, rest and repeat. Past and future's blithe tango through our lives. Soon the seasons will settle, as did life between us. We will say the things we need to say, those things I've told myself could lure songbirds back to the garden, those things that will let me place an LP on the old turntable and tango effortlessly into tomorrow. Thank you.
And there you have it, another Poetry Square. Wonderful readers tonight. And I want to thank Yuba Sutter Arts and Culture for sponsoring our show. And I'm the poet in residence for Yuba Sutter Arts and Culture. And wonderful show tonight. Thank you again to all my guests. And next month in December, we will be hearing from Sharon Smith Knight, Linda Crawford, and Ida Glockel. And thank you, everyone, and happy holidays coming up. Good night.